The Minoans were an ancient civilization that flourished on the island of Crete during the Aegean Bronze Age, approximately 2600 to 1100 BC. Renowned for their vibrant cities and palaces, such as the famous Knossos, the Minoans are considered Europe's first advanced civilization. They developed a sophisticated society with impressive artistic achievements, characterized by intricate frescoes and pottery, which depict a deep connection with nature and also maritime activities. They were also known for their unique writing systems, nowadays referred to as Linear A and Linear B, with the latter being deciphered as an early form of Greek. Their civilization gradually declined under mysterious circumstances, including possible natural disasters or perhaps invasions, leading to the eventual rise of the Mycenaean civilization on mainland Greece. Do you want to learn more about them? Well, you are in the right place. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, it's good to meet you, and if you're coming back, it's great to have you back here with me again. As always, if you want to support the channel, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. Otherwise, if you think YouTube should show my videos to more people, clicking the like button will push them in the right direction. Now, without further ado, let's begin our exploration into the Minoans. Before we do begin, much of our references will be archaeological ones, and do keep in mind that there is a lot of speculation involved, particularly since we are talking about a civilization that existed around 4,000 years ago. So, please bear that in mind. The Minoan civilization of Crete is categorized using two primary systems of chronology. The first is based on pottery styles and divides Minoan history into three main periods. There's a few abbreviations, so we'll go through them. The first is EM, Early Minoan. That's from around 3100 to 2100 BC. MM is Middle Minoan, from around 21 to 1600 BC, and LM being Late Minoan. That's from 1600 to 1100 BC. Now each period is further divided using Roman numerals and letters, such as EM1, so Early Minoan 1, EM2, EM3, and then, of course, LM1, MM2, and so on. Do you get it? Great. Well, there's another system that was developed by Nicolaus Platon, and it organizes Minoan history into four broad periods, those being pre-Palatial, proto-Palatial, Neopalatial, and post-Palatial. Now, both of these systems are okay to use, but we'll generally be using the former one around the EM, MM, and LM. Though if you do hear mentions of the one from Nicholas Platon, that is completely fine too. Now, establishing an absolute chronology for Minoan civilization has always been complex, due to many discrepancies between the historical synchronisms and scientific dating methods, such as carbon dating. For instance, the volcanic eruption at Terra, a crucial event in the LM1A period, remember, late Minoan, is dated around 1600 BC by carbon dating. But it is placed about a century later when aligned with Egyptian historical records, which we have a few more of and we tend to understand a little bit better. Now we have mentioned the early Minoan periods being from 31 to 2100 BC. Of course, that is true. However, the origins of the Minoans trace all the way back to around 7000 BC, with the first anatomically modern humans on Crete. Evidence points to significant cultural influences and possibly migrations from Anatolia or the Levant, both rather close by. So, early Minoan periods saw the development from Neolithic farming, Neolithic being New Stone Age, New Stone, farming communities to more structured urban settlements. EM1, around 3100 to 2650, introduced the first painted ceramics, and by EM2, being from 2650 to 2200, Minoans engaged in significant trade with not only Egypt but also Syria, and this is marked as well by the emergence of masted ships. The period also saw the start of monumental building projects that prefigured later palaces, and indeed the Minoans were very famous for their palaces. Now, the Middle Minoan period is defined by the emergence of proto-palatial society, using Nicholas's terminology. MM1, around 2100 to 1875, seems to have witnessed a rapid population growth, and along with it, major construction, including the initial palace structures at famous sites like Knossos. MM2, 1875 to 1700, introduced Minoan writing systems, such as Cretan hieroglyphic and Linear A. MM3, running from 1700 to 1600, continued these developments, and also included the rebuilding of palaces after seismic destructions. Indeed, we have plenty of evidence for earthquakes. Now, the Neopalatial period, from 1750 to 1450, is characterized by architectural innovations and widespread adoption of Linear A writing system, indicating the peak of Minoan cultural influence across the Aegean and also on mainland Greece, and that will become very important. During the late Minoan period, that was from 1700 to 1075 BC, so quite a broad time spectrum, Minoan civilization experienced significant developments and upheavals that culminated in profound social changes. This era is particularly renowned for producing some of the most iconic Minoan artifacts, such as the snake goddess figurines, the La Parisienne fresco, and the vibrant marine-style pottery. And there's plenty of it. Now, late Minoan 1, that's 1700 to 1470, marked a continuation of the prosperous Neopalatial culture. Yet it was also defined by the catastrophic eruption of the Terra volcano, which happened around 1600 BC. This eruption, one of the largest volcanic events in recorded history, devastated the Cycladic settlement of Akrotiri and impacted several sites in northeastern Crete. Despite these disruptions, other regions, notably around Knossos, witnessed a flurry of construction, flourishing trade, and cultural flowering post-eruption during the LM1B period, circa 1625 to 1470. Now, late Minoan 1b ended with widespread destructions across Crete, signaling the collapse and breakdown of Neopalatial society. These destructions, however, appear strategic, targeting specific areas while sparing others, such as the preservation of the palace at Knossos amidst the burning of the town. The reason behind these destructions has been widely debated, and there's no real solid theory. But between the contemporary, well, not contemporary, but somewhat later Bronze Age sources and our modern sources, all speculation, but making an educated guess to Mycenaean invasion, internal conflict, or perhaps simply the residual effects of the Terra eruption. We're yet to find anything really conclusive, but one of those three. I suppose it's a roll of the dice. Now, late Minoan II, that was from 1470 to 1420, is less well represented in archaeological findings, and is generally perceived as a period of decline, with fewer records of substantial achievements or any real developments at all. Well, of course, that changes in late Minoan III from 1420 to 1075, which witnessed dramatic shifts, including the rise of the Mycenaean Greek as the administrative language, and increased influence from the Greek mainland, indicating the ascendancy of a Greek-speaking elite ruling class. This period saw the systematic decline of Minoan palatial centers, with only Knossos remaining active until its final destruction in LM3b2. The societal collapse continued into LM3c between 1200 and 1075, part of the broader late Bronze Age collapse, during which the Minoans retreated from coastal areas to more easily defensible mountainous locations. These communities maintained elements of Minoan culture into the early Iron Age, despite the overall fragmentation of their civilization. Crete's diverse climate zones and varied elevations provided a range of natural resources, but the island's lack of metal deposits likely propelled the Minoans to establish extensive trade networks. Seismic activity is, of course, a notable feature of the island, with many archaeological sites showing very strong evidence of earthquake damage. The distribution of Minoan sites is primarily concentrated in central and eastern Crete, with fewer sites in the less accessible western parts. Now, speaking of sites, there was more than just the main city of Knossos. In fact, there's quite a lot of different sites that are of interest, but I'm just going to mention the top 5. The first, of course, being the city of Knossos, if we may use that terminology. It is the largest Bronze Age archaeological site on the island of Crete, notable for its size and historical significance. Its population varied significantly over time, and of course it peaked during the height of Minoan Civilization. The next is Phaistos. It's known as the second largest palatial structure on the island, and it gives us some valuable insights into Minoan architecture and society, along with Hagia Triada, an important town and administrative center not far from the aforementioned Phaistos, renowned for the substantial number of linear A tablets that are discovered there. Next up is Komos, a harbour town serving Phaistos and Hagia Triada, featuring civic buildings that reflect palatial architectural styles. And then, of course, Malia, known for its palatial ruins, providing us with a glimpse into the proto-palatial period of Minoan civilization. Of course, as I said, there's many more, but this was where the bulk of the activity was going on. I'm not going to go through every single one of them. Why will I not go through every one? Because I just won't. Anyway, moving on. The Minoans, primarily based on Crete, were heavily engaged in trade, establishing cultural contacts across the Mediterranean. This, of course, included all the big players of the time. You're talking Egypt, Cyprus, the Levant, and Anatolia. That's kind of central Turkey. Their influence is evident in the discovery of Minoan-style frescoes in elite residences at Avaris in Egypt and Tel Kabri, reflecting a far-reaching scope of their trade and cultural exchange. Minoan ceramic styles and techniques varied in their impact on Helladic Greece, showcasing a dynamic interplay of different cultural influences. And beyond Crete, Minoan settlements or trading outposts extended to several key locations, first being Castri or Kythera. This island near the Greek mainland saw Minoan influence from the mid-3rd century BC, until it was overtaken by the Mycenaeans in the 13th century BC. The transition here represents a significant cultural shift from mainland-derived cultures to Minoan dominance, and then, of course, the later Mycenaean occupation. Cyclades. This group of islands was within the cultural orbit of the Minoans, further emphasizing their maritime capabilities and the spread of their influence. Next up was the 3 islands of Carpathos, Saria, and Knossos, which hosted Middle Bronze Age Minoan colonies or settlements, although most were abandoned by the LM1 period. Carpathos notably continued Minoan cultural practices all the way until the end of the Bronze Age. And last is probably one you may have heard of, being Rhodes, specifically the settlement at Ialissos on Rhodes serves as a evidence of Minoan expansion and also colonial activity. The presence of Minoan culture and its artifacts in places like Thebes, that's in Egypt, around the 15th century BC, where paintings depict Minoan-appearing individuals, suggest active and possibly official interactions, with inscriptions referring to them as coming from Keftiu, a term which we believe to indicate Crete, or just the Cretans in general. Now on Crete itself, the Neopalatial site of Kato Zakros is exemplary of Minoan outward-looking societal structure. Positioned near the modern shoreline, its numerous workshops and rich site materials suggest that it functioned as an entrepot, a hub of trade and commerce. This interpretation is supported by artistic depictions such as the flotilla fresco from Ankratiri, which illustrates the Minoans' extensive maritime activities and their integration into the broader Mediterranean world. Now, Minoan art, celebrated for its lively and imaginative qualities, especially for the time, is a cornerstone of Aegean art and exerted a significant influence on the contemporary Cycladic art, even maintaining its dominance after Crete's occupation by the Mycenaeans. Due to the perishable nature of the materials like wood and textiles, the surviving examples of Minoan art primarily include pottery, intricately carved seals, frescoes, small sculptures, jewelry, and quite a good bit of metalwork. The subject matter in Minoan art, of course, varies widely, often recurring across different media. Iconic scenes such as bull leaping, which likely held religious significance, are depicted in both paintings and sculptures. The portrayal of animals, particularly marine life, is also prevalent, exemplified by the marine-style pottery from the Middle Minoan III and Late Minoan I periods, which features sea creatures like octopuses enveloping the pottery, inspired by similar fresco scenes. Minoan art also includes representations of hunting, warfare, and equestrian scenes, especially in later periods, and was likely to cater to Mycenaean tastes, or perhaps simply just under Mycenaean influence. Unlike the precision of Egyptian art, Minoan depictions are a lot less naturalistic, often sacrificing accuracy for dynamism, resulting in figures that are vibrant, yet sometimes anatomically vague. One notable aspect of Minoan art is its frequent depiction of female figures, a contrast to the predominantly male representations in many other ancient cultures. However, this brought about the notion that Minoan religion was solely matriarchal, but this is not really the case. Of course, that was believed for a while, but it's been somewhat revised. Perhaps we'll find something that makes us think again about that. Well, figures typically adhere to the Egyptian convention of portraying heads and legs in profile, while presenting torsos frontally, though Minoan art exaggerates certain features like male waists and the female chest. Landscape painting in Minoan art generally involves floral and faunal elements, framing or interspersed within a scene. There is a distinctive stylistic convention, where environments are depicted as viewed from above, yet individual elements are shown in profile. This unique perspective is also evident in the seascapes that accompany scenes of fish and boats, providing expansive backdrops that are unusual for the time. The Heraklion Archaeological Museum near Knossos hosts the most extensive collection of Minoan art, offering a comprehensive view of the artistic achievements of this ancient civilization. And if it's not on your list, well, it's certainly on mine. Throughout the history of Crete, a variety of pottery styles and production techniques can be observed, reflecting changes in taste and also power structures. Early Minoan ceramics were distinguished by their decorative patterns, including spirals, triangles, and fish bones, with regional variations pointing to shifts in societal dynamics. Accompanying these ceramics were numerous small terracotta figurines. As the Middle Minoan period unfolded, the designs of pottery began to become more naturalistic, featuring motifs like fish, squid, birds, and lilies. However, depictions of human figurines remained extremely rare throughout Minoan ceramics, contrasting sharply with later ancient Greek vase painting, where human portrayals were very common. Minoan jewelry predominantly found in graves, initially had a focus on hair ornaments and diadems for women, crafted primarily from hammered gold. As time progressed, gold began to become a little bit more hard to come by, and jewelry designs included necklaces, bracelets, and rings, often incorporating beadwork and intricate designs seen in frescoes. Notably, the Minoans excelled in granulation. That's a technique exemplified by the Malia pendant, which depicts bees on a honeycomb. Therefore, metalwork in Crete was fairly sophisticated for the time, with the Minoans creating elaborate weapons and tools from imported gold and copper. Although fine bronze weapons like swords and daggers have been found, they are less common than in Mycenaean Greece, where warrior burials frequently included richly decorated weapons. Minoan daggers, often with gold hilts and decorative inlays, showcase the height of their metalworking skills. The production of metal vessels in Crete spanned from the early Minoan II period to the late Minoan III B and C period, with early examples likely made exclusively from precious metals, and later items from bronze. These vessels, which ranged from cups to large cauldrons, and even elaborate lamps, suggest a continuity in craft that extended into the Mycenaean culture, evidenced by the presence of Minoan-style metalwork in Mycenaean contexts. This implies either direct imports from Crete or the influence of Minoan craftsmen on the mainland. Well, it wasn't all just artwork. I had to do a little bit of quote-unquote real work from now and then. Thus, the Minoans had a diverse agricultural system, raising cattle, sheep, pigs, and goats, and of course cultivating crops like wheat, barley, vetch, and chickpeas. They grew a variety of fruits, including grapes, figs, and olives, and possibly used poppies for seed and opium. Bee domestication highlights their versatility in farming and food production. The island's native flora included vegetables like lettuce, celery, asparagus, and carrots, along with native pear, quince, and olive trees. The Minoans introduced date palms and cats from Egypt, enhancing their agricultural and environmental management. Pomegranates were adopted from the Near East, enriching their diet, although citrus fruits like lemons and oranges were not incorporated. Now, the Minoans practiced polyculture. That's a sustainable farming method that supports soil fertility and reduces crop failure risks. This diet, of course, led to population growth, supported by a robust agricultural system evidenced by linear B tablets that documented the management of orchards and secondary products like olive oil and wine, which were central to their diet but also their economy. Of course, they live on an island, so seafood played a big role in their diet too. But the primary focus was on the agriculture on land, as suggested in the presence of marine life in art and poetry. Like the LM3C octopus stirrup jar. The importance of seafood is further indicated by the remains of edible mollusks found at sites, although it seems to have been secondary to staple foods, which I would have thought The main food was seafood on an island like Crete, but maybe they didn't like it as much, I don't know. Of course, wild game, such as deer and boar, were also popular, but their role in the diet is debated, especially concerning the use of now extinct Cretan megafauna. Artistic representations, like the harvester's vase and the sacred grove fresco, possibly depict agricultural festivals and celebrate soil fertility. Storage facilities in palace compounds, such as those at Phaistos and Knossos, suggest these sites also served as redistribution centers for produce, supporting a class of administrators, craftsmen, and religious officials who were not involved in direct agricultural labor. This specialization indicates an advanced societal structure capable of supporting various professional and administrative roles. Of course, if you're going to be farming, you're going to need tools. And Minoan tools evolved from simple wood or bone to more sophisticated bronze implements with oval-shaped holes in tool heads to prevent spinning on handles, showing innovation in tool making. These tools, including axes, sickles, and chisels, facilitated their agricultural practices and contributed to the efficiency of their farming and craft production. Thriving from their strategic position in the Mediterranean, they developed a robust network for international trade that extended across Egypt, Mesopotamia, Anatolia, Cyprus, Syria, and even all the way to the Iberian Peninsula, that's over in Spain and Portugal. This extensive trade network was pivotal for the exchange of goods such as ceramics, copper, tin, gold, and ivory. Minoan craftsmanship in pottery, particularly the distinctive Kamares ware and the later marine-style pottery, was highly valued and widely distributed across these regions. Now on to a little bit about religious practices in Minoan culture, which prominently featured female deities, with numerous frescoes and sculptures depicting priestesses or goddesses, which indicates significant roles for women in both religious and potentially political spheres. This, of course, is one of the reasons why scholars consider the possibility of a primarily matriarchal society, or at least one where women held considerable power, or at least they had the opportunity to. The concept of a palace economy is central to the understanding of Minoan society. The palaces, such as those at Knossos, Phaistos, and Malia, were not just royal residences, but also administrative hubs where agricultural produce and goods were collected for redistribution. These palaces were integral to managing the internal economy, and possibly played roles in coordinating trade and crafts. The political structure of Minoan Crete remains less understood due to the undeciphered linear A script, which keeps many of its aspects of the administrative and ceremonial life pretty obscure. Well, while earlier theories posited a monarchical system, possibly centered at Knossos, more recent interpretations suggest a more complex scenario involving powerful elite families or clans who might have controlled different regions of Crete through their respective palaces. This shift from a singular monarchical system to a more distributed power structure may explain the absence of clear kingly figures in Minoan iconography, which of course contrasts with the explicit representations of rulers in contemporary civilizations like Egypt and Mesopotamia. Indeed, I think that this may be the explanation. Now what about women? What do we know about them in Minoan society? Well, a little bit. Not much, but a little bit. What we have primarily comes from art and some of the deciphered linear B tablets. Of course, we have plenty of linear A tablets, but we don't know how to read them, which leads one to think that perhaps there is some kind of Rosetta Stone-like tablet underground somewhere that perhaps holds the key to unlocking those secrets. But as of the 13th of April 2024, we are yet to find one, so keep looking, I suppose. Now, in artistic depictions, men and women were distinguished by skin color, actually. Men were shown with darker skin, and women were shown with lighter skin. Women's clothing evolved to become more elaborate over time as represented in the art, emphasizing on displaying the more sexual characteristics. This is evident from the portrayal of women's garments that often featured low necklines to expose cleavage, or even give away the whole show. Both genders were of course depicted with slim waists, a feature accentuated in the attire of the time. Now, Minoan art categorizes women into different societal roles, as the following were elite women, common women, and servants. And, of course, there were those who were engaged in religious activity who were a category unto their own. Elite women were portrayed as significantly larger than those of lower status, highlighting their higher social standing. Women's roles in society were primarily centered around household management and childcare, with older men possibly taking on responsibilities of managing the household and mentoring the younger women. There is also evidence that women participated in crafts, such as ceramics and textiles, not just your normal weaving and pottery sort of thing. Now, interestingly, while women were often depicted in roles associated with childcare, pregnant women and scenes of childbirth are conspicuously completely absent in Minoan art, at least what we have discovered so far, suggesting that these aspects of women's lives were either considered socially sacred or somewhat sensitive topics, and thus kept predominantly as private affairs. Archaeological findings indicate that childbirth was of course a perilous ordeal, with numerous skeletal remains of pregnant women suggesting high mortality rates during pregnancy and childbirth. Of course, this was not something that was unique to the Minoans, but just generally the kind of situation you would face in the Bronze Age. The remains often include fetal bones, highlighting the commonality of death during childbirth, with mothers buried alongside their newly born and quickly diminished children. Do not want to say those two words in the same sentence. Now, additionally, evidence suggests that nursing women also faced significant health risks due to the intense nutritional demands of breastfeeding, which of course could lead to malnourishment and death. Well, moving away from that, let's think about what kind of clothing the Minoans would dress themselves in. The Minoans made extensive use of sheep wool for their textiles, which were likely a significant part of their economy, possibly even a major export. Now, linen was there as well, but it was considerably less common, and it was possibly imported from Egypt or perhaps cultivated locally on Crete. There is no definitive evidence for the use of silk, though it cannot be completely ruled out, at least not yet. Minoan clothing styles, as depicted in art, show a distinct fashion sensibility. Men, if they were poor, typically wore loincloths, or more elaborate robes or kilts, which could actually be quite long. Women's attire consisted of long dresses with short sleeves and layered flounced skirts, designed to emphasize a slim waist, a style detail often exaggerated in artistic depictions. Both men and women wore thick belts or girdles around the waist to highlight this feature, kinda like those weightlifting belts you see when you're doing deadlifts. You know the ones, the gym belt. Women might also wear a strapless, fitted bodice, and both genders favored symmetrical geometric patterns in their garments. Regarding grooming, Minoan men usually are shown as clean-shaven with short hair, except for some long tresses, reserved for perhaps the elite youth. Women typically had long hair styled in flowing tresses down their backs, as exemplified by the figure known as La Parisienne, named so for its perceived resemblance to the early 20th century Parisian fashion. Children are often depicted with shaved heads, save for a few locks, until they approach the years of maturity, as seen in artistic representations like the Acrotiri boxer fresco. Now onto Minoan jewelry. It included many intricate gold hair ornaments and thin gold plaques that were sewn onto garments. Floral decorations were also popular, both worn in the hair and depicted on clothing, indicating a rich tradition of decorative arts that extended to both textile production and personal adornment. Now, before we go, of course, we have to talk a little bit about what we know about Minoan religion, which was characterized by its complexity and the ambiguity surrounding its deities and rituals. It remains particularly obscure due to the undecipherable Linear A script and the non-textual nature of much of the archaeological evidence. Originally, scholars like Arthur Evans suggested a monotheistic worship centered around a mother goddess. However, more recent analysis suggests a diverse pantheon, including a young male god, among others, indicating a more structured polytheism rather than a singular divine focus. Deities in Minoan culture were often depicted alongside symbols and attributes, such as snakes, doves, and double axes, which could signify various religious or mythological roles. Peak sanctuaries, frescoes, and votive figures suggest worship practices that included both male and female goddesses, with significant roles possibly for a mountain goddess, a snake goddess, and a dove goddess. Of course, these figures may have represented or been associated with nature, fertility, household protection, and animal husbandry. The line between deity and clergy seems to be somewhat blurred in Minoan art, at least depending on your interpretation, which often depicts figures in ritualistic attire that could either denote priests, priestesses, or the deities themselves. Religious practices likely involve significant ritual activities as suggested by artifacts such as the labyrinth, and ceremonial structures like the horns of consecration. The labyrinth, by the way, is those double axes that we've mentioned, the ones that are often depicted, the symbols alongside the deities in the artworks. Bull leaping, a prominent ritual depicted in numerous frescoes, may have also been a religious or perhaps a social rite, potentially connected to elite status or perhaps a rite of passage. Now, late Minoan artifacts, such as the Hagia Triada sarcophagus, illustrate complex funeral rituals and possibly sacrifices of bulls, hinting at beliefs surrounding death and the afterlife. Also, the use of saffron in ceremonies depicted in frescoes suggests it had a ritualistic importance, possibly in purification or as an offering. Minoan sacred symbols, the bull's horn, those double-headed axes, pillars, serpents, and sun discs found across Crete and as far off as Cyprus, point to a religion that integrated natural and celestial elements together, perhaps influenced by or influencing contemporary Near Eastern and later Greek religious practices. Burial customs were varied. There wasn't a one-size-fits-all for the Minoans, with regional differences in practices such as circular tombs in southern Crete and house tombs in the north and the east. The use of tholoi and complex burial structures, like those at Malia, indicates that burial rites were an important aspect of Minoan culture, possibly involving rites of passage, ancestor worship, or even, disturbingly, human sacrifice, as suggested by some archaeological evidence at sites like Anem Soplia and Forno Corifi. That being said, it's hard to know for sure, as, well, the dead tell no tales. Well, thank you very much for joining me. It's been another great video, which has made me actually a little tired, because I just got back from the gym, so must finish off videos before we sleep, of course. It's been a pleasure, as always. I'd like to say thank you to my Mega Chat tier patrons, that is Stark Factory, JC, and Jeffrey. And if you would like to support the channel, you know what to do. Head over to the Patreon and take a look. But until next time, I will wish you a good night and farewell. See you later, everybody. Goodbye for now.